Alright, Brickers, it's time to explain kind of what's going on with the inlet manifold situation. Because I'm a bit torn at the moment. I've got some issues with the inlet manifold. Which one to use and which one presents problems. My first plan was always to use the turbo inlet manifold. I made it a bit shiny, thanks to Rascal Baz for powder coating it. But it does present me with quite a few problems from choosing to use it. The first one is the fuel rail. So the fuel rail on the NA car is a return one, so it goes back to it has a fuel pressure regulator, and then it has a return line that goes back to the fuel pump, the fuel tank, and that's good, that's what I want. But the turbo one doesn't have that. It doesn't have a return. It's just got like this Schrader valve vent thing. It's non-return, but I'm going to be upgrading the fuel pump to a Walbro 255 litres per hour, I think. I need a fuel pressure regulator, which I've got here somewhere, from Speeding Parts, obviously, which has the two inputs and then the return at the bottom, and then a vacuum line for the boost. And then that needs like the return line to the fuel tank. So with this being a returnless rail, it's only got an input on the underside, and then that's it. So the options, I can modify this rail to make it a return one. The NA one, you see underneath, you've got your feed and the return. So you've got two holes on the underside, you've got your feed and your return. But if I offer it up here, the brackets, because the injectors, does it go that way? Yeah, the fittings are nowhere near. So fitting this rail onto the turbo inlet manifold, basically a no-go. The amount of modification I'll have to do to this, bit too much, I think. So I've got to figure out how I can make this a return one, or I just buy, you know, a Speeding Parts or new fuel rail new, and then make the brackets to fit it, and then that'll be all good. So that could be an option. The next one is the coolant situation. Obviously I explained in the last video that the wiring for the Max ECU T5 harness, it was supposed to route to here, but even then I had the wrong plug on. Because on the NA, the thermostat's here, on here, and possibly the T5, I think the thermostat's on there as well. On the turbo, the T6, it's here, and then the wire goes up through, in between the cam pulleys, and then out here. So that's another issue that's causing. What else? Yes, the throttle cable. Well, throttle body in general. So first one is that I want to use the e-throttle, which using the e-throttle for the turbo engine, my car has a cable, so using drive-by-wire, I'm going to have to custom make a pedal, get all the wiring sorted, then have it programmed in with the ECU, so that's a big job. If I use the NA inlet manifold, I don't have any of that issues. I can just use it with the stock cable throttle, jobs are good. Also with the throttle body on the turbo inlet manifold, if you see here, the throttle body is on the bottom, facing down, whereas on the NA inlet manifold, I've got it here actually, the throttle body is on the top, facing up over. So with that being said, it's pointing straight at the engine mount. I need to have a look to see if this is possible to work, but getting a 3-inch pipe from here to here and have it curve, I'd have to curve it backwards towards the back of the engine to even have a chance of making it work, like the intercooler piping, and then come around here and then back to the intercooler, or forward to the intercooler. I need to cut this pipe here to see if that's even possible. If it's not, that could be my fate sealed. I'll just go with the NA inlet manifold. you see here, I don't want to use this ugly piece. It's got a big bowling ball on it for some reason. Who knows what Volvo were thinking there. I love these individual runner things, they're cool. But I mean, what purpose would they solve other than creating a potential air leak? Obviously, all the things I've mentioned, you've got your fuel pressure regulator here. I can use my cable throttle, which is nice and easy. I could potentially swap over if this doesn't fit, this coolant pipe doesn't fit, and I use the NA one, which is here. I could have my thermostat in this location, but if I do that, then what do I do to delete this one to make it open permanently? Or do I do that by plugging it into the ECU and controlling it that way? I'm just creating myself problems if I want to try and delete this on the front of the engine. It's ugly, it's dirty, I don't want to use it, but for all the reasons that I've just mentioned, you know, the issues with the fuel rail, the throttle, and the intercooler piping, and potentially the thermostat, it might be a better idea just to use the ugly inlet manifold to get the car working and not have to deal with the whole e-throttle situation. Now, what you think, Brickers? If you want to comment down below what you think, what you would do. As I say, my fate might be sealed if I cut this U-bend, because I've got two straight bits here, so I need to cut at least one of them off to see if I can place this bit here on the inlet, on the throttle body, and then see if the bend is good enough to clear the engine mount. So let's give that a bit of metal a cut and see if we can make it work. No deburring tools, so I just use some 60 grit sandpaper just to smooth the inside of it out. Now, moment of truth. Let's offer this up and see if it clears the engine mount. There is a bit I can cut off the engine mount if needed. Where are we? Here's the engine mount. I can cut this off here, this bracket, if needed. But there's our throttle body, and there's our engine mount. Legit haven't offered this up yet. Right, let's zoom you out a little bit. So hoping this bend here is going to take us away from the engine mount. Right, so I can't get near the engine mount because of this bracket here, which I'm not using. But if I offer that up in line with the throttle body, so that is pretty much in line. Now look down here, by the time it gets down to the engine mount, even though the throttle body is directly above the engine mount, if we bend this way, by the time we get down to the engine mount, we've got a couple of centimeters there of clearance, so I can cut this bracket off and cut this bracket off here, and we should be good. In fact, I don't even have to go straight back. I could turn it. Hang on. I'm not going to be able to go 90 degrees towards me, but you know, instead of going, you know, straight back, I know I wouldn't have this length on here, but could maybe go somewhere like this towards the chassis rail and then do another 90, like come down back at a bit of an angle, then well, guess more than a 90 degree to bend back this way towards the intercooler, which is about here. Use your imagination. So, in summary, this is good. It'll fit, it'll work. I need to cut a little bit off the engine mount, but in terms of the intercooler piping, which was one of our issues that we weren't sure of, we can kind of cross that off the list of objections. I'm trying to rationalize using this thing. I'm trying to rationalize using this inlet manifold. So that's one more job done. Oh, one more thing about the differences between using the turbo and the NA inlet manifold is the power steering pump. So if I'm going to use, that's the turbo coolant hose without the thermostat, then the power steering pump's right here. So this is another thing, I was going to use this because the threads on the high pressure line here on the T6 engined power steering pump fit with the ones in the car, in the NA car, which is crazy considering this came out of a 2004 XC90. If we go back to the NA engine, you can see here, not only have we got the reservoir on top here, and this is the thermostat, and it's a different shape and it points in a different direction. So like the thermostat, coolant thing, the power steering pump, the power steering reservoir, and the inlet manifold all kind of need to, if I'm swapping one, I likely have to swap all three. Didn't want to swap the power steering pumps. But again, using the turbo inlet manifold, one extra job, one extra issue, because the reservoir isn't on the power steering pump. Got a Volvo, got a power steering pump reservoir from an XC90. So I'll have to find somewhere to fit this, and then that goes to the low pressure line under there, and I've got no idea what this is for. So I need to figure that out as well, and somewhere to mount this sensibly in the engine bay. Most likely somewhere higher up than the power steering pump. I've got my intercooler pipe kit, which I've just been butchering. So in there we've got silicone hoses, loads of clamps. I'm not planning to use all of the hoses and all the clamps because there are a lot of them. I'm gonna have hoses and clamps on either end, i.e. the intercooler, the throttle body, the turbo, and then everything in between is gonna be welded by Stellar Performance. There may be one join in the middle somewhere, but you know, temporarily I'll definitely be using these just to mock it up, and then once I'm all sorted, I'll be handing it all over to Stellar Performance to weld them permanently. That'll do nicely. Well, I think we're quite close with that. There's a few things that need finessing. I need to cut the silicon shorter because it's too long. And then once I've done that, really, we should have a bit of a better fit. So we'll get even more clearance once I cut the silicon to size, because at the moment it's preventing the intercooler pipe from having a bit of extra clearance because of just like the angle it's forcing it, because it's too long. But even then, you can see here where I've ground down the engine mount, that little bracket that was on there holding wiring on before. We've got some daylight in there, if you can see, but that's only going to improve once I shorten the silicon. It's going to improve massively. So I think for now we're pretty good. At the moment, like, the intercooler's over there, so the pipe's going the wrong way. But once I shorten the silicon and finesse the fitting of this, I'll be able to move this further around this way, so it's going to be closer to a 90 coming straight out from the engine, and then we've just got a 90 going forward along the chassis rail, or at least avoiding the alternator and my AC delete bracket somewhere through here, and then to the intercooler. Got the internal wastegate that I got from Speeding Parts, the Turbo Smart. Now the thread, well, the size from the whole set turbo, this is 1/4 inch, like close to 6mm. The whole set one was bigger. It was more like an M8. It may have been Imperial, it may have been metric, I don't know which. But anyway, the whole set wastegate actuator rod was bigger. This is smaller. So with the Turbo Smart one, I didn't get the adjuster, the end piece here. I didn't get that with it. So the one I had on the whole set didn't fit on the end of that. So I bought this one, which I thought was the right size, but it turns out it's got the wrong thread pitch. So I've got a tap. I'm just gonna re-tap this hole, and then this should thread onto the end of this, and then I can attach it to the turbo. Just a quick one on why I'm changing out the internal wastegate actuator for the Turbo Smart one, so the factory whole set one. This turbo is from a Cummins engine, and being a diesel as well, diesel turbo, it's going to be crazy high boost, and that's not what I want for this build at this point. So what I've done is I've bought the Turbo Smart wastegate actuator. It has a 1 bar 14.7 psi spring currently, but I plan to get a lower one, maybe 7 or 10 psi spring, and then I can control the boost using the max ECU, and I'll have a boost solenoid as well, so I can increase the boost from there. But if I start from the internal wastegate with a really high boost, then there's not really anything I can do to reduce it. So I'm going to start low with a soft spring in the Turbo Smart wastegate actuator, and then use the ECU to increase from there. Well, Brickers, it's looking pretty good for the inlet manifold so far, and also the wastegate actuator. In the next episode, we're going to dive quite deeply into the fuel situation, which is also again linked with the inlet manifold, and we'll have a little look at the oil lines as well. But until then, thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace, and don't forget to subscribe.